Yes, there we go. Thank you. Do I advance the slides here? Okay. What I want to do is just quickly tell you, for those of you who don't know Pakora, a little bit about Pakora and how it came to be. But then I want to especially tell you about what we're currently doing in terms of the opioid epidemic, and also in terms of infectious diseases within the opioid epidemic. And I want to highlight especially how Pakora works. Did I do that? Oh, okay. So Pakora is an independent research institute. We are authorized by Congress. We fund, we are not a federal institute though, we fund comparative effectiveness research, meaning that in the studies that we fund, there need to be two options, two treatments, two diagnostic tools, two approaches to something that has to do with patients that are being compared. One of the things that sets us apart is how from the beginning it has been, the center of the work has been to engage patients and other stakeholders in the research. And so the questions that researchers propose to us are evaluated based on the idea that they need to answer real-world questions. So these can't be academic questions about, well, it would be really interesting to know this. They have to be questions that answer something that is actually going to help patients and their caretakers and physicians make decisions. It stopped working, I think. Can you advance them? No. So just to give you a sense of where Pakora fits into the larger world in this country, in this area, there are, of course, the NIH and industry and academia, which are focused on discovery. That's not discovery of new treatments, discovery of new procedures, etc. That is not Pakora's role. Pakora is also not involved in any regulation or approval. We really come in after things have been discovered and efficacy has been established and they have been approved and there's some regulation around them when they actually make it to the real world. That's where Pakora comes in. And then we work very closely with institutes like ARC and CDC in terms of dissemination of results, etc. Pakora works somewhat differently from NIH in that, and I've touched on this already, so we really focus on answering questions for every study that we fund, we need to hear from patients and patient organizations that this actually matters to them. We do a lot of engagement during topic development, so in terms of what we're going to focus on if we have a targeted funding announcement, but also when we evaluate studies that researchers bring to us, we really talk to all the stakeholders involved. Is this a question that matters to you? Would it help? Does it help any decision making? So these are our stakeholders. They really include every party that is involved in healthcare in some way, and it always depends, of course, on the topic who we're going to be talking to and who we invite. I want to talk a little bit about what we've done in the regarding the opioid epidemic. Pakora has really taken an approach that starts with pain, alternatives for pain treatment, etc., all the way to addiction treatment. And what you can see here is that the last funding cycle was in November, and we've so far funded 74 million studies to fund 13 studies related to opioid use. We really have taken the approach of spanning the whole care continuum. And I won't go into all the studies that we funded, but I'll just give you a general sense of some of these studies are focusing on prevention of unsafe prescribing. So they are interventions that face providers or that face patients in terms of prescription opioids that are out there. We also have funded a number of studies in the area of non-opioid treatment options for pain, because and it's interesting because just recently these papers have come out that show that opioids are no more effective for either acute or chronic pain than just the non-steroidal, the NSAIDs. And that is not something that really is changing the landscape, I think. It's not something that people believed that most of us believed like a decade ago. Then the next category where we've funded a number of studies is management of long-term prescription opioid use. So people who are on very high doses of opioids, who are at risk. We're studying interventions like switching dose volunteer, and this is all very patient-centered. So nobody's being told that we're just going to reduce your dose. It's really in communication with the patient. Dose reduction of opioids or switching from a full agonist to a partial agonist like buprenorphine, which has a better safety profile. So a number of those studies are currently collecting data. And then we also have a number of studies in terms of treatment for opioid use disorder. We had a funding announcement for looking at delivery of medication-assisted treatment. Of course, we know that medication-assisted treatment is an evidence-based treatment. However, a lot of patients are not getting this evidence-based treatment. And so we focused in our first funding announcement on pregnant women specifically. And those, we're currently looking at the applications, and the awards will be made in May. We have another study that looks at personalized medication-assisted treatment. So it is and it takes place in federally qualified health centers where patients are individually assessed. They receive medication-assisted treatment, and then there's a menu of other services that they're getting. Cognitive behavioral therapy, contingency management in order to increase treatment retention, and there are a number of other services that are available. And so this study will look at whether implementation of that personalized approach in federally qualified health centers improves outcomes. And one of the things that Pakora does is these things are all well and good, but somebody has to pay for them. And so what Pakora does is in order for a study to even start, stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, the ones, including the ones who are going to pay for things, need to be involved so that once the study is over, and if the results should suggest it, they actually will be implemented. It won't be just something, yes, that works, that's great, but we can't do it anywhere. These are things that have to then immediately move to implementation. And then I want to say, and I could talk like for 2 hours about all these studies and which stakeholders they include, et cetera, but I also want to say something about the specific studies that we have funded in infectious diseases in the context of the opioid epidemic. We have currently 2 studies, and so just as a little bit of background and I think most people here know, the incidence of hepatitis C in patients who have substance use disorders is higher than in patients who don't. However, access to treatment has been especially challenging for this population. There is the issue of the cost of the newer medications. But then also in terms of providers and payers, there are concerns about this population, about medication adherence. Will people show up? Will they take their medication? About reinfection because of shared needles, etc. And another important issue is something we've just heard about also, is linkage to care. So how do we connect patients to this care? And we have 2 studies currently that are looking exactly at that. And these are addressing some of what we just heard about in the previous talk. These are patient-centered models of hepatitis C care. And what they're testing, one is happening, actually, he's no longer at Montefiore. He moved to Greenville in South Carolina, but the study is ongoing and it's a multi-site study. So the first study looks at patients who inject drugs. And they are randomized to either a patient navigator who will meet the patient somewhere and talk about the medication and then remind the person of the medication, etc. There is a tele-delivery element in there because it's very difficult to meet somebody in person every day for medication. Patients are given a phone with which they take a picture of themselves taking the medication, and they then send that to their patient navigator. And the other arm, in the other part of the study, other arm of the study, patients who are receiving methadone take the medication and get the care in the methadone clinic. So this is getting towards the integrated care, which indeed it's not brain surgery. It's really just connecting these different providers. And so this study will show for which patients which model works better. For which patients is a patient navigator better? For which patient is care or the medication done through directly observed treatment in the methadone clinic better? The other study by Andy Talal takes place in New York at a number of different sites, and looks at a tele-delivery approach. So patients who come to the methadone clinic to get their medication-assisted treatment for opioid use, also those who also have hepatitis C, either get a referral to a specialist, which is usual care, or they can have a teleconnection to the hepatitis C, to the infectious specialist in the clinic. And so that study is also an access and an integration study, and will show for which patients that actually improves outcomes. And that brings me to the end of what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.